teaser alert. What I'm thinking is to have Lucky Kat's one project, have Catnap that's another project, like the two artist projects, and then have a separate channel that is sort of like devoted to making any kind of music. But if you look at every track I've ever produced, it starts with a beat. It really starts with the beat rather than like an instrument or a melody. It starts with the beat. I was blown away. I was like, I went into it saying I can't do this, and then I realized I could. So then I kind of started getting fed up of trying to say to people like, I do this, like all these different genres. And I'm trying to think how far in, but I think maybe around it was quite about the 2 year mark. It took a bit, maybe like a year and a half. I started saying, right, I'm just gonna create my own genre.
Welcome back to the show, Dave Lowe. Thank you for coming on the Round 2 PolyCast. Last time you were on here, you're a serial entrepreneur and even building a PPE company during the quarantine. So this has been a while back. Since then, you've done music, live streaming, real estate, and more. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And obviously happy to be back on the show supporting this. You. PolyInnovator.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Polymath PolyCast, highlighting your multidisciplinary life, showcasing that it's okay to do many different things. This is the round 2. The first time you were on the show, you were one of the first few guests, number 5 actually. And so, what have you been doing since the last time?
Number 1.
Huh?
You told me number 1.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding. It was early though. It was very early. What was, just because I suddenly thought about this, but where did we meet? Because it was like it was something like, was it Matchmaker?
Probably
it was Matchmaker. Okay, yeah. Because I thought that's what the name was.
Now, to be clear, Matchmaker.fm, okay, like the podcasting tool.
For guests on podcasts rather than dating.
So yeah, but what have you been doing since the first time you came on?
Well, I've been moving around the US. That's the most obvious change. So I think when we did the last interview, I was in San Diego, and that was the PPE company during the pandemic. So yeah, we were right in the thick of the pandemic. Yeah. Which was obviously rough for most people, certainly entrepreneurs. And then I exited that company and I moved from San Diego to Phoenix for 3 years, which was a tough place. That was the toughest. I'm like, how can I spin this as a positive instead of just saying like drive straight through Phoenix and never go there. What did I learn about the time 3 years in Phoenix? I guess I was in the house a lot because of the heat, and I spent that time really kind of like working very hard, 16-hour days again, back to the grind as you do when you start a business. And I launched Catnap Music, which is my record label. Worked really hard on Catnap, which is one of my electronic music artist projects. And then Catnap was the label, and then I liked the name, so I thought, let's do an artist project as well as it being a label, which, was kind of weird, but it worked.
And that's where LUCKYKAT comes in.
Yeah, exactly. So really, it was just focusing on that. And then DJing, I was getting my first DJ gigs, learned how to DJ in Phoenix, had a mentor for that. And then started just doing, playing like bars and weddings and all sorts of stuff just to generate revenue in music, I guess. Because streaming, if anybody is watching this or listening to this and they've tried to go into music production and learn that like I did on Ableton, and then you're like, right, I'm going to make it on streaming and on Spotify or Apple, good luck off the bat, because it's going to take you just years and years and years, and probably, I think I read this, I think it was like about $1 million, I think it's like $1 million to like break an artist, something like that, to like get to the point where you can generate sustainable revenue. Well, you're probably breaking even on Spotify with the promo, but like you can make a sort of sustain, good amount of money on Spotify. So yeah, early on, it's like luckily I realized pretty quickly the streaming was not going to sustain me as an artist or producer, and with a wife and 2 kids, if it's not going to sustain me, it's not going to sustain them. So then you got to look outside that as ways to make revenue. So yeah, so that was pretty much Phoenix. And then about 5 months ago, myself and my family moved to Denver in Colorado. So much richer culture here. Electronic music scene especially is great. You got Red Rocks, got all the big acts coming through Red Rocks Amphitheater.
Went from hot to cold.
Well, here's the funny thing. So left Phoenix in May, so it was probably it was right around the 100 mark, like every day. Way too hot. and got here, and it was in the 90s. But I learned, I was like, why does it feel like a similar intensity with the heat? And they said the UV intensity here is like 25% higher than Phoenix, which blew my mind. But then again, you're at altitude, you're a mile high here, so it kind of makes sense. So yeah, because of that, right through until I would say a few weeks, maybe even like 2 weeks ago, we were still in the 90s. Now we're like early 80s.
Yeah.
So it's doable. And then 50s in the morning and at night. So much preferring it though, overall, the weather.
So you moved around, you started music. I definitely want to get into some of the live streaming stuff later too, but I'll just probably have you on the PolyTools Creator Spotlight later interview show so we can just talk about live streaming and music artist content creation. But it's definitely interesting. Like, you definitely have to be multidisciplinary as a creator like that. You have to be able to have multiple streams of income and multiple arms going out. So you started LUCKYKAT and KATNAP. How did those originate when it comes to like the ideas that you wanted to create?
Yeah, so with LUCKYKAT, really, I was listening to a lot of, what most people would call EDM in the US, like electronic dance music, and it was very kind of samey, and I thought there's definitely room to like take electronic music in a kind of another direction. And then people started saying, what do you produce? And at first I was like, well, progressive house, and then I would drift into like minimal techno or progressive house and then deep house. So then I kind of started getting fed up of trying to say to people like, I do this, like all these different genres. And I'm trying to think how far in, but I think maybe around it was quite about the 2 year mark. It took a bit, maybe like a year and a half. I started saying, right, I'm just gonna create my own genre and do what's kind of like the entrepreneur in me. It's like, how can I stand out from everyone instead of being put into the tech house genre where you're just one in a million. Like, I'll create my own genre, and that I call that high contrast. So that was really like progressive house, deep house, minimal techno, bit of tech house. But crucially, the high contrast bit is like the songs have a quite a broad dynamic range, so that you'll have quite intense moments as the beats are layering, and then it's getting to like a crescendo, and then there'll be a drop off to a much more kind of mellow breakdown, let's say, where it's a little, it's quieter. So it's giving you almost like giving your ears a chance to rest, recover. And then it comes back in with the beats, heavier beats. So, that's where high contrast came from. And then with KATNAP, I noticed that everyone had jumped on the lo-fi hip-hop train. And again, it was very samey. And I really love that. I love lo-fi hip-hop as a subgenre. And I thought, again, how can I sort of, again, take this further? And again, same as high contrast with LUCKYKAT. It was like, right, I'm going to create new lo-fi, which it's my interpretation of the lo-fi hip-hop genre. So really I would describe, instead of it being like a blend of different subgenres, you've got kind of like, I would say, quite positive, nostalgic sounds for about a minute, and then it goes a little bit darker and a bit more, I don't know, like deeper electronic, and sometimes there'll be kind of pretty good impact beats in there, and then it'll come out of that. So it's almost kind of like, best way of describing it is kind of like daydream, nightmare, daydream. So it's just that, I think the idea is that it surprises you. I want to kind of surprise you in a good way.
Throw some curveballs in there and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's not going from like opera to techno and back, but it's just making you kind of go, okay, like, it's making you think it's just going to be a lo-fi hip hop song, and then suddenly you go somewhere else, and then you come back to it, so that it's like a refreshing experience for people. And hopefully, well, so far it's actually doing well. Like the debut album is called Rabbit Hole, and I collaborate with a bunch of singers, a bunch of vocalists around the country actually, who were brilliant. And there's a few tracks on there. There's one called Different Side of Me, and that's probably, of all, I might lean towards LUCKYKAT as like my favorite project, but I'd say my favorite song and the best song, or I feel like the best production quality, is Different Side of Me, and that was with a band called Bougainville out of Phoenix. So that's just, it's a sweet track, you know, and it really hits you. So yeah, so that's Catnap.
Yeah. One day you and I will do a track together too.
Yeah, deal.
So it's interesting. The beauty of this show is that, like, when you first come on, you get to experience, like, hey, here's all the things different things I get to do that I do in my life. When you do the round 2 Polycast, you get to come back and see how your life has evolved since the last time you came on. And you're a great example of where you were doing 3 different things before, very business related, and now you got to express a lot more of the creativity side of things, and you're still doing business stuff, but like, especially with the real estate kind of thing. But it's really interesting just to see that dynamic and the changes. And I like how you're differentiating yourself with those unique subgenres. What made you start making music though? Like, what really motivated you to start doing that in general?
Well, if you like way back, I started out like my dad was a very good pianist, so the piano was always getting played in the house, right? Like some houses I know, there's no music, they're not into it, not there or present, and then so having that as like the soundtrack and the Beatles getting played on piano and just that was like that made me want to try and play music instrument. Funny enough, never played piano. I think my dad probably taught me a few times, and it was really complicated, playing the rhythm and the lead at the same time, and just my brain just wasn't having it. So I started on, you start on like the recorder, right, at school. You know, you start, it's like, try this, and you give it a go. It's quite easy. And then like the kazoo. So like school, you really like school instruments, and then they sort of say, hey, do you want to try like the violin? And I was like, go on then, I'll give it a go. And I was like, for some reason I sort of liked it enough to give it a go, and I played that for a few years. And then because my dad was playing piano but loved classical music, so we would listen to that in the car a lot. So that got me into like violin. And then teens was like guitar. It's like you become a bit more of a rebel. And I was very lucky because I was born in like coming into my teens, it was like Oasis and the Britpop movement, and so everywhere you went, because I'm from the northwest of England, everywhere, and Britpop and Oasis and Manchester's down the road. So you soundtrack really on the radio, on the way to school, at school, anywhere you go, supermarkets, it's playing Britpop. So you soundtrack. So it was incredible, because then that would inspire you to start a band. Mm-hmm. So I got in a bunch of bands playing like guitar, bass, drums. I played drums for a bit, and then like percussion, like Latin, bongos and congas, playing Latin percussion alongside bands for a bit. And then I went to uni and sort of dropped out of the band thing, got more into electronic music. So then I started playing Latin percussion in clubs with DJs that I got in with, like a Spanish group of DJs, playing at like Turnmills, which was like one of the biggest clubs in London at the time. I think it's closed since, but and then I did sound engineering. I did a sound engineering diploma, so that got me sort of into it, but then I couldn't work out how to make enough, like a living from it, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I started doing like more businessy stuff and cutting my teeth in like companies, let's say, in London, film industry briefly. So really it's been this whole, like, really the Phoenix thing, what I kind of learned about it is going back to my roots and really what was in my heart, and music was there. But I found electronic music during the pandemic when I was just inside. Yeah. So when I got COVID really bad, I'm trying to think if we done this in the first interview, but I think we talked about this, but I got COVID really bad. Mm. And I was just in the house recovering for about a year. So I could learn Ableton, which is the DAW, which is the digital audio workstation. I could learn that for like 16 hours a day, because it's like I'm not doing anything else.
You're stuck at home, yeah.
Just recovering. So that was a really good chance to learn that in San Diego. And then in Phoenix, I'm just like practicing that really, and then I got turned on to like live streaming, and found Twitch and then TikTok, and started to try and do that as a way to like get fans, if you like, and listeners around my music. So that was kind of working on a lower level. But again, it's like streaming. You don't get into it and just become an overnight success on Spotify. You don't live stream an overnight success on that. So it's a grind. It's definitely a grind. But I would say that has definitely helped get eyeballs on, or ears on my music, if you like. So, yeah.
Over the last 6 years I've been on TikTok, I've seen a lot of music artists kind of go on there. Some of them blew up, some of them didn't, some of them were just kind of consistent at it. But having that funnel from TikTok or YouTube towards their Spotify or other music platforms is interesting to think about. Like, that's been a pathway for a lot of people to success. Twitch is one thing, but there's no discoverability, as you and I talked about on there. And so it's really hard to kind of get your foot in the door. And it's good to have the live streams. I think you and I were talking just recently about this too, where it's nice to be able to have a place where people can come talk to you and meet you and collaborate with you on the live stream. But without short and long form content, it's hard to get that pathway there. So it's great for building a community, and that even helps expand your community to new people because the word of mouth. But you also still need to have the start to that. Like, you have to have the short and long form content just to bring people into that.
I mean, Twitch, for example, obviously long form content. So I was like, right, I'm gonna invite people into my studio via Ableton on my live stream, so you could just see the whole door and just see me editing and making music in real time. And I was doing that tops. I was doing it like 6 hours. But when you're on there for 6 hours and you get maybe, I don't know, like 30 to 50 people come on, it's not a lot. It doesn't feel like a lot, and there's not a lot of engagement. You might get views, you don't get a lot of comments early on. So you try it for a bit, and what I found with that is I wasn't getting any kind of traction, let's say.
Yeah.
I was putting in the effort, I thought, and I thought the content was useful for new producers, but it was the time, let's say the time commitment to, I don't know, engagement or results, I don't know what you would call it, just followers.
ROI, yeah.
Not even the ROI, but just the conversion to the ratio, time to followers was low. So, and what I realized is that TikTok actually was good because you could create content first, short form content, to get people to come to your channel. Mm-hmm. And then you could entice them with the long form content on top of that. Now, it wasn't, it wasn't horizontal. It was mobile. Yeah. So is it I was getting mixed up. Is it 916 for mobile? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had that instead of 16:9. So from a learning standpoint or educational standpoint, it wasn't as good because you couldn't see what I was doing. But on TikTok, people, it was more about the chat. You get more engagement, more people chatting. And then I started to try different content. I'm a Liverpool football fan, soccer. Where are we? US soccer fan. Where's this going out? Where am I? But yeah, I'm a soccer fan, Liverpool fan. So I would do the games, and I realised I couldn't have the game on in the background. That would get me blocked, the copyright blocked, and it happened a few times, which was really frustrating. But I would just like this. I would be watching. You'd be watching me watching the game, and I thought, no one's going to do that. That's stupid. No one's going to do that. Guess what? I did a Liverpool Man City game. I got 35,000 people, something like that, viewing in 2 hours. I was like, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't be doing music. I should be doing football streams.
Just to say you can't do both, though. I mean, that's kind of the point of the show too, where it's talking about how do you manage your time. And there's also this idea of, you were talking about how live streaming wasn't really quite worth it for you for a time there because you just couldn't get that the hamster wheel going and get that momentum. But with TikTok, I remember seeing a ton of your videos on TikTok, and it's interesting to think about, now that you have hours upon hours of live stream content, you could toss it into Opus Clip or tools like it or anything like that, even just do it yourself and make those VODs on YouTube. There's also a screen share feature too, so you could actually have your DAW on one side and your face cam on the other and turn that into a TikTok. And so there's some interesting ways to go about
that would be a great idea. See, that's what I'm exploring at the moment, and you've told me about that, which is useful. So I'm trying to work out how to take, kind of like this, long form content. We take the long form interview, how to splice it up into bite size clips that are very engaging. And you look at content on YouTube and TikTok and you see what works, and typically it's that they look good, like the video quality is good. There's movement, so the cuts are kind of fairly quick, but the content is useful. Like you can either you're really curious about something you can't do and you want to watch it, and live vicariously through that, or you're applying what they're telling you. You can actually apply it. It's like applicable to your career or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what's missing for me at the moment. Like I'll do the live streams and I'll do maybe the clips and the highlights a little bit, or it's like short form content. But I feel like the thing that's missing for me is like how to make music more fun to make, if that makes sense. And make anything, not just like specifically, not just like you're watching me make my music. This is how I make my music. In other words, really it's fans. Mm-hmm. Versus like feedback. This is how you make this genre or that genre, or make a beat out of anything, where it's like that's more of a follower thing than they're interested in that because they can do that themselves. Versus, so it's like almost like more followers than fans.
Maybe what you could do is like a niche for your videos on like YouTube, for example, could be the community of music creation, and how do you collaborate with your community? Especially now that YouTube is pushing the communities tab too. They're building out a new feature so you can have like your own Discord channel on YouTube. Yeah.
Well, I've seen that before where people will make tracks from fans that submit sound bites or Foley clips, Foley audio from like field recordings, or like, or it's like like crowdsourced. It's like crowdsourced beats, that kind of stuff. Make a beat using all these beats, submit all these samples sent from your fans, that kind of stuff. So that's like super engaging for your community. Yeah. Or it's like, looking around the studio, make beats using whatever I have over here in the studio, like
there's a lot of creativity,
or a spoon, or I don't know, anything.
Yeah.
Mouse clicks, like clicking your mouse, that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff interests me because I like making beats. So what I've realized is I never thought of myself as a beat maker, but I am, and I love making beats. I just don't market myself as a beat maker. But if you look at every track I've ever produced, it starts with a beat. It really starts with the beat, rather than like an instrument or a melody. It starts with the beat. And so that, I think, is where, like, I've spoken to some of my fans, let's say, and said, hey, if I do this and I show you how to make beats specifically, is that of interest? And they're like, yeah, that's that, because I want to learn how to make beats, or I want to learn how to make beats out of anything, like any sound, and how to like edit those sounds to bring them into Ableton to create a beat. So that's like broad versus just like follow LUCKYKAT and listen to my music, which is,
you gotta have some sort of like factor of differentiation besides just the music, and that's a good way of making your content. We'll talk probably more about this on the PolyTools channel, but it is interesting, like on my channel here I have the long form interviews, and then we have the clips that come from both. I'll either make short form videos, but mainly I repurpose from these interviews, and sometimes I repurpose from my solo content, but the solo content is me teaching about knowledge management, or on the PolyTools channel is teaching how to be a creator. And so like the content is different for all three types.
Yeah, and on that note, it's interesting that you're splitting that. Because at first, I was always thinking, like, let's say one brand to, rain down on everything, or like create a bubble and an ecosystem, and it's LUCKYKAT's the whole thing, or KATNAP music is the whole thing. But what I'm teaser alert. What I'm thinking is to have LUCKYKAT's one project, have KATNAP that's another project, like the two artist projects, and then have a separate channel that is sort of like devoted to making any kind of music, teaching people how to make any kind of music from anything. So that will be the third channel that I'll be starting. where it's just more broad.
Yeah, but you're at a place where you might be able to build up your main channel by doing that as your main content stream. I'm not sure exactly how wide you want to make that channel. I definitely have an issue when it comes to this. You mentioned like the content ecosystem. That's something that like not everyone understands, but when you have multiple different niches, when you have multiple interests like people on this show do, you have to find a way to market those interests differently. And I started out my PolyInnovator channel, the one we're on right now, and I had a certain two different topics that I eventually marketed as the same this year, like basically in January. It took me that long to realize I needed to change the marketing of it. But I have two other channels that I wanted to originally just keep on here and have everything under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
But due to SEO and just due to how your fans are going to accrue, it's better to have them on separate channels, like the gaming channel, the content creator channel, and this channel. And so I get what you're saying. Like sometimes it is best to make a separate channel. I just wonder if maybe that educational content would be a good lead-in to your music production channel.
Well, I think on that channel, let's say it's Lucky Kat and Catnap, and then it's like Dave Lowe. You know, that's more of a Dave Lowe creating music channel versus like. So I don't want to say like these are Lucky Kat and Catnap, but like actually, yeah, let's see them like brands in a sense, but. The Dave Lowe channel is me. It's like I'm making music.
Brand, yeah.
It's much more personal. It's much less tied to a specific brand, let's say. And it's like more, here's how you can make music, or here's how I make music, and then here's how you can make music. Like apply it, or I don't know, collaborate. Let's collaborate and do this. But then, like you said, there could be very easily. There could be like, this is how I did this beat for this Lucky Kat song. Well, here's how I did this beat for the Catnap project. So there's a way you can definitely tie it in that goes beyond recommended channels on YouTube, and you just put like Catnap. Like, okay, like, but if you can actually create content around that is doesn't seem too promotional, it's like natural, which is going to be the case, then great. You know, you might as well send people over there as well.
I could definitely see your personal brand being an education channel where like here's how to make music, and then you could link to the other channels. I had a gamer on my PolyTools interview show, and the game that he was known for, a zombie game, I played as one of my first video series on that channel. So I was able to link to that interview of me interviewing him on the gaming channel because it was related to the content I was already making on there, and I was able to connect those two channels, that kind of thing, stuff like that.
You know, again, it's like if anybody watching this has built a channel from scratch, like a YouTube channel, in fact, any channel, but I would say especially YouTube, it is hard, isn't it? You know it. It is really, it's the hardest. YouTube's the hardest channel to grow a subscriber base. I just went through, so I started that pretty much day one because I was thinking like an entrepreneur. I'm not just gonna do this project and then later on retrospectively claim the handles. Like, no way. It's like day one, Lucky Kat Meowsic. That was the differentiator. It wasn't just Lucky Kat. It was Lucky Kat Meowsic because haha Meowsic music, and people might remember it. And then 4 years later, about 4 years later, I just gone through the 600 subscriber mark on YouTube. So that gives you an idea of how, like, what's that, 125 a year roughly? Mm-hmm. To get to that. And
more than likely, you got most of that in the last 2 years.
Well, last year, I would say, was the majority. Because about a year ago, I decided to try not just doing a DJ set, because there's billions of those. It was like, I'll do a TikTok live, I'll take the full recording, which was 2.5 hours, I'll chop it up, because it was like a high contrast mashup mix. So I was using like 3 or 4 tracks to make a unique single mix, let's say, like, 4 tracks into one, and blending, like, funnily enough, saying before, like the high contrast between like you wouldn't do techno and opera. That's exactly what I did. I'd get good techno beat and bring in some beautiful opera, and guess what, it worked. And people were like, wow, that didn't think that would work. It did. So anyway, I chopped that up into like minute clips, and because it was a 2.5 hour mix, I had about 100 clips. And then instead of just keeping it on TikTok, well, I did it on TikTok. That grew my following to about 6,600 followers. And I did it. I repurposed them for YouTube Shorts, and I posted those 100 clips about 2 or 3 a day, back to back, like for about, what would that be, about a month. And my following, at one point, the following doubled, I think, in a week.
Yeah.
So,
it's amazing how...
certainly in that period, let's say a month, just for argument's sake, in a month it doubled my following. So guess what? I'm thinking of doing the same thing now, or a different, totally different mashup mix, and doing the same thing to try and double it again. Because I want to get to the 1,000 mark, because obviously, you know, not just the more subscribers, the more you're going to get found, but I feel like it just, personally, I think it's so difficult. I find it so difficult to get the following up that when you get to the 1,000 mark, so many creators would have just given up by then.
Yeah.
So I feel like YouTube is setting that monetization level to 1,000 because it's like, oh, you're serious. Like when you get to 1,000, YouTube kind of goes, oh, this guy's serious. Or this guy's
I think
serious.
there's also like 1 million views too. Like there's other ways of getting to that mark. That's only 1 out of 3 check marks you can hit to get to monetization. Like 1 million views, I think, is another one. And Dave, just for context, whenever I started using Opus, for example, to make these clips for the show, it was a year ago. And so I had done basically 3.5 years of interviews at that point. And so, I mean, for example, our interview was so early on, but there was so many evergreen topics on there that I was like, I still want to share the clips from this. I don't care that it's old. It's still a good show. Yeah. The only timed topic was probably COVID, and even then, there's a lot of lessons from those talks like that I've had that can still be applied to the future. And so I started repurposing all these different clips, all these interviews into clips, and eventually I got to the point where I needed to get them out. And so there's a whole different conversation to be had there, maybe on the other channel, about like how do you mass produce and then how do you bulk upload all those clips. But I always told people on TikTok back in like 2021, way back then, that you should be posting 5 maybe 10 times a day if you want to grow, because that's what I was seeing some people do, and they were growing rapidly. And 3 times a day is still really good. So I'm glad you did that for that month sprint, but I could definitely see what had helped you. For a while, I was doing 8 to 10 posts a day for months on end because I had 2,000 clips to go through, and 10 is the limit for most platforms where they start to like tell you like, hey, it's too much.
Well, you hear this, don't you, from like the marketers, and it's like 8 to 10 a day, and it comes back to like the mind share thing, right?
Yeah.
Like how are you one of the first people at the forefront of people's minds, let's say. And I don't want to say like advertising, right? But it's when you think about it, you are literally competing against millions and millions and millions of creators who are just most of the time putting out more content.
Yeah.
And ideally you want it to be quality and frequent. Quality, frequent content.
Well, quality
that's the hardest part in the beginning because you think, well, what am I how can I create? What's the creative process? And like, okay, I'm on Ableton. I'm making this genre. Is that enough to be at the forefront of people's minds? No. You know, I'm getting 1 million streams on Spotify. I don't. But if you were, that's going to catch people's attention. You know, like how, I don't know, if like a YouTube video said how to get 1 million streams on Spotify. By the way, if you click on a lot of those, they don't actually tell you how to get 1 million streams on Spotify.
Yeah,
it's same with classic clickbait, right?
Yeah,
it's like the how to get rich books. It's like the only person that's getting rich is the person the author, that you're funding. So by buying the book. So I would say what I've learned the last probably year is mobile content. Everyone's on mobile, so short form mobile content that's really, you know, again, high quality video, quality quick cuts, and you've got the text layovers and something that's just a hook that's like a technique, how to make this beat, how to make, I don't know, anything, like how to create this sound. And then that is not going to get you the success, let's say, but that's going to get people to go down your rabbit hole, let's say, and further explore your content. Because if you really think about it, all the time, like you think, oh, I'm following this guy now, or I like their content. You actually think back to how did you find them? And it's typically it's not long form. You've typically found the short form content first that's led you to the URL that's on the profile that then leads to their YouTube channel. It's like TikTok to YouTube or TikTok to Spotify. So you're getting taken down the rabbit hole. And then, or it's something else. Like recently I read, there's like a library here in Denver, like down the road. So I just literally went down there, grabbed the book, and it was a music, digital content creator book who's a musician. I was like, this is cool. So that's how I found that creator, through his book in the library. And then I found his YouTube channel, and I'm just totally hooked on that. It's a really great channel, and it's given me a lot of ideas on how to create my own channel and give me confidence to do that. Because this guy is like partially deaf, and he's a brilliant music creator. So it's like, that's a huge challenge, that he's had to overcome. But he doesn't shy away from that. He's highlighting, often how he's getting through that. And again, he's not the most super extrovert, confident guy, but he's just worked out how to convey his ideas through video, because video is like, it's the second best thing to meeting someone in person, right? Which, let's be honest, most people are not, other than playing live. You're not going to be able to just go out and meet thousands and thousands of people. So guess what? Video is the next best thing. And you do that well. So when I see your content, it's like getting to know you through your content, and you deliver that well, so that you entice people, or pique their interest to go and explore more, of your content.
Well, and that's why from the beginning with these interviews, I chose to do video, because even just in the last conversation, both of us were using our hand gestures, for example, nodding, seeing the logo on the hat, and this guy right here. But essentially, like, there's that point of communication that you can only get visually. Kind of pivoting here, how did you get started with real estate?
Well, I was in, let's think, when I first started getting interested. So when I was doing Uber Pong, which was a ping pong start a few years ago in Austin, I frequently encountered founders of companies and entrepreneurs who networking events, whatever, and they were like super successful. And I would say, how is it your startup that's got you to be this successful? They're like, no. Like, well, what is it? Like, real estate. And they would always come up and they're like, oh, I invest in real estate, or I'm in multifamily, I've got a multifamily apartment building. And so that planted the seed. And then I sold Uber Pong, which was that ping pong company. I sold that, and I started investing in real estate on the low end, let's say, just single family buildings, houses. And then I started learning about the real estate investment community and how you could start with single family homes, go into like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and up into like 100-unit apartments. And one of the people I met through this real estate investor community was a teacher in San Diego. And I said, no offense, but I didn't think teacher salaries could get you into a 100-door apartment building. And he goes, no, it's not just me. It's like, I got a syndicate. I know how to do it. So he's learned how to like manage that property and get the right property management team in, and how to acquire the building. But he has like a team of investors. So he's part of like a syndicate where he can get in on these big deals on a pretty, let's say, modest salary in California, no less. California is very, very expensive as well. So he's got overheads. But he's managed to gradually build up to that point where he's got 100-unit multifamily. So that kind of got me really interested on the real estate investor side. But when I was in Phoenix and I was, looking for, let's say, another career, or let's say a career move where I could do something and become a specialist and do it for years and years and years, become a specialist. Real estate was kind of top of my mind. And then because I hadn't done great at school, and I don't typically do great in a sort of like, let's say, theoretical exam environment, I just get too kind of stressed about it going into it, and then I get very stressed when I do the physical exam. Anyway, I took the national and the Colorado state exams and passed, and I didn't, I was blown away. I was like, I went into it saying I can't do this, and then I realized I could. And then that allowed us to move, escape Arizona and Phoenix and move to Denver, Colorado. and start practicing at Keller Williams, at one of the biggest brokerages and brands in the world. So, under their brand. So, great. Their training's been great, and I've been on the residential side. And very recently, I was talking to people in my network who, again, were primarily in like Austin and San Diego and Phoenix, and I realized that they weren't necessarily going or interested in buying like single family homes on the residential side. These people were like running restaurants, and they wanted commercial space, and they wanted to like scale things up and build, let's say, their own little empires. And so I couldn't help them directly, or I didn't think I could help them directly, but I took a lot of those kind of deals, let's say, that were brewing or that they wanted, and I took it to the owners, let's say, of the brokerage, and then they said, oh yeah, we'll connect you to the commercial team, and they just moved in. I hadn't even met them. So then I got on the phone with one of the owners of that commercial business, and he's like, great, and we did just a simple deal where it was like a referral agreement, so that when that deal eventually comes through, I'd make a really good commission on that. And then in about a week, I sent him, I was calling a lot of people, and I sent him 3 leads, and he was like, and it wasn't like by design, I wasn't necessarily going for it, and he wasn't recruiting, and 3 commercial deals in a week essentially, and he's like, hey, we should talk about you joining the team. Do you have any interest in commercial real estate? And I was like, yeah, big time.
Yeah.
But I just hadn't thought about it in my mind. I sort of thought residential for a while, and then I actually thought you could only get into it after 2 years of experience, and I was wrong. You can get straight into it. So suddenly it was like all that real estate investor stuff and the multi-families and like building wealth through, not just single family homes, but getting into like apartment complexes and investing in retail spaces, malls. And then like redevelopment projects. That was really interesting because I'd seen that in like Las Vegas, for example, and in the cities I'd lived in, like Austin and San Diego. And so that changing the face of the city through redevelopment was also a passion. So yeah, literally I've just joined this commercial team, so I can handle commercial deals and learn, a ton about that, but also still handle residential as well. So, but that's really cool because now I can get in on the business, more of the business end, let's say, and dealing with people who are like really serious about, accumulating wealth and doing development projects.
It's definitely a common mindset in the business community. I've noticed a lot of people I've talked to who are entrepreneurs, they talked about real estate, and there's been a few guests on this show too that have brought it up.
Yeah.
I have done my own research when it comes to like building wealth, and real estate's obviously just one of the biggest ones that people always talk about, and just in general, not even specifically which kind. And I just never knew how to get into that myself too. And again, like on a teacher's salary, you can't afford it, and so it's kind of that hard limit there. But if you could just make a decent amount of money from like selling a business or something like that, build something, then sell it, and then use that liquidation income to then buy your first starter home, and then from there build up.
Yeah. So, for example, the other day, like I literally went to my commercial guy and I said, I've met people recently where they say they want to get into the commercial side and investing, but they can't afford to. They don't know how to get in as an individual. And then he tells, he says, I think it's called a private placement memorandum. And I'm pretty sure I got that right. And what it means is that you can form or be part of a syndicate. So you can be an individual and you can join a group of investors, and there's that memorandum that, makes it legitimate and legal, let's say, and above board, and that allows you to get in on those deals. And if you actually think about it, or if you explain it, like you can explain it, let's say the wrong way, where people are kind of like, I don't know, it still seems risky. I don't know the other people. How many people have like thrown in their life savings, like literally, and I know people have done this, life savings into crypto.
Yeah.
Where, you slap your forehead basically and go like, what are you thinking? Like, and then they've lost it. Like, and people who go to Vegas have put everything on red or black and they lose it all. Do you know what I mean? And then you're telling them about one of the oldest industries, let's say, in investment channels, it's like extremely stable compared to everything that you see in like crypto and cybersecurity. Even like there's just so many like tech startups. Like it's so unpredictable and unstable, right? And yet, if you tell them about real estate, sometimes they're kind of like, well, I don't know, this not sure about
Seems
that.
a little sketchy.
The markets might turn. It's like, what? And crypto's stable. Like and it could just disappear tomorrow, pretty much. So yeah, it's just kind of funny how some people are wired. But a lot of that, of course, comes from media, because you're not necessarily, because real estate isn't new or trendy. It doesn't necessarily catch your attention. Whereas a new investment vehicle that pops up, like Bitcoin,
catches the eye.
Suddenly it's like, oh, I can get rich overnight from this. Like, yeah, if you got in 10 years ago as one of the people who launched it, yeah, absolutely. It's like kind of like the ultimate pyramid. It sort of feels like the ultimate pyramid scheme. Like if you get in early, or you're the leader, you're going to do well. Everyone else that follows, you're just helping them get richer. And you might do all right, you might not.
So you've brought up a lot of topics today, Dave, and it's interesting to think about. Like on this channel, I talk about phases, and these phases are either your niche or your focus or your area of expertise, any of those three. And how do you balance those phases in your life, which directly goes into time management, stuff like that. And so like you mentioned before, like you had plenty of time, so you could spend 16 hours learning Ableton and doing live streaming and stuff like that. But when you have less time because you have family time and you have a new job now, stuff like that, it really starts to limit how much you can do some of the other phases. And so at some points you might be 33, 33, 33, splitting between the three, or maybe it's 80, 20. Sometimes I like to talk about how you do 10% keeping the flame alive of the last one, 10% sowing the seeds for the next one, but 80% of your time is focused on the main one. And it's just interesting, how do you manage your polymathic life? Yeah,
good question. Like a few years ago, it was all about, like, balance came up, didn't it? Work-life balance. America for years was just work. It's like home of the entrepreneur, workaholics, work all the time to then go spend all your money on consumer products, right? Fill your house with it and then get depressed. Dark
humor Dave.
And then the mental health revolution came in because of that. So, but yeah, it's like balance the thing. And I remember reading somewhere, can't remember the book, but it was all about balance and how it's impossible. That was the thing that came out of it. And it was, and it said, instead of trying to balance everything perfectly and be a perfect equilibrium, you basically put everything into the thing that you want to put into until there's like a breaking point, let's say, where it causes the others to kind of topple over or suffer, whatever it is. And at that point, you then ease up on that thing and then readdress the other things that need more balance or attention, let's say. So that was kind of like an interesting one because it was just a different way of looking at balance, I guess. But that, I would say, is that's kind of the approach that I'll probably be taking more. But also, what I do like is and speaking of balance, is like from a mental or brain standpoint, if I go all in on real estate, like I went all in on startups or a startup to get it to the point where it's like successful and I can maybe have an exit. That's where you get burnout, because you're burning out a side of the brain or a part of the brain. And I worked out that is important, let's say, because you're generating revenue and building a reputation or starting a career, whatever it is. But you're doing something that will sustain you, right? Mm-hmm. But I would then have to come away from that and focus on music, focus on something creative to ignite that side of the brain. And that gives me balance where I'm doing that. So, but then here's the funny thing is when I was doing 16 hours a day doing music and live streaming, I was burning out the creative side of the brain. Mm-hmm. And guess what? The entrepreneurial or the more, let's say, businessy, money-making side of the brain was like just dormant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. So I had to. So it's like I'm doing all this great creative stuff. It's not really making any money. Okay, great. We'll switch across and let's try and work out how to, do that. And obviously, ideally, like the real ideal is to make everything I'm doing a success, but really to make the music side a sustainable revenue generating thing. That really was day one. That was day one. From day one, that was the first. The big goal is to survive from the music, like the creativity and the music making side, so that there was less pressure, let's say, on or like having to go away and do another thing because the music thing wasn't working. It's like I could choose to do both or multiple projects, and they were all sustainable.
It is interesting to think about. A lot of the topics I talk about in my solo content is like juggling versus serialized approaches to polymathy. And what you described there was the serialized approach, where you do one, then the other, then the other, then the other. And both are valuable and both are viable. But it's interesting to think about how a lot of people unconsciously switch between them, let alone, or they don't switch often enough consciously. And so in 2023, I planned going into that year that I'm going to juggle three, ended up being kind of four, but it was mainly like three different things.
Yeah.
But this year, I kind of took it back down to just basically two focuses, having a third tangentially, and understanding like that's what kind of the yearly level of your kind of planning needs to be. Like, okay, you're reviewing what happened last year. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What do I need to keep getting done? And then with the preview of the next year, like what are you planning on doing? Then you can plan out like, hey, okay, so I didn't get this done last year, so I need to make that a focus this year. I did get this done last year, so I can put it off to the side for now. It still needs to have some content going out to keep it alive, but that's about it. And I always kind of think about each phase has its own kind of big project. So like the swimming phase for me has a book. Once I get that book done, make some content here and there, but that'll be done. That's capped off for a while. And so I think that's a good way of looking at it, though. Like if you could find what that big project is for you and figure out like, hey, how can I cap off this phase? Then I can keep it alive without having to put a whole bunch of like 100% focus into it.
Yeah, I think it's like trying to. There's certain projects that you do, right, where you start it and it just takes off fast, let's say. Mm-hmm. So Uberpong for me was like, I started that, we were making sales from day one, it was sustainable like from day one. The press came very quickly, got a national TV spot, within 2 months. Within 2 years, it was celebrity ping pong tournament with the LA Dodgers on the field at Dodger Stadium, like nuts, like just nuts. Guess what? That's not every startup, it's not every business that you run. And my big, shocking sort of revelation was that was the first one proper. I'd done a bunch of little, let's say, side hustles, and I was dabbling in it, right? I wasn't committing to anything. It was just side hustles and side cash. Whereas Upong was a hit. Like, first proper start was a hit. And that was the best thing and the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, because it really kind of gave you the wrong kind of view.
Didn't happen. They either didn't launch, or they weren't a success, or so it was kind of like devastating in a sense, because it's like, that one worked, why is the second one not working? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So, what is the next phase for you on your journey then, Dave?
Well, I mean, I would say Denver was like a really important move for myself and my family. I feel a lot more balanced here. Or not balanced, aligned, that's better. That's a better way of putting it. I feel much more aligned with the people, the culture. I like the weather here, the weather's great. Mountains being so close, you can always hop up there and hike and get some amazing views. Where I used to live in England, I was close to the Lake District, so that was I feel like maybe that's why I feel better here. And then really I'd say the next big steps are establish myself in the real estate space, just become an expert in the commercial space really primarily. I can still do residential and be good, very, very good at that. Pro at that, but just be an expert and the go-to guy in the commercial real estate space. So it's like if you want to, build a tall building or open a mall or purchase a mall or whatever, like do cool, fun real estate commercial transactions, me to be leading that in Denver and becoming successful in that space.
I like that. And one thing I kind of want to touch on before we wrap up too is the idea of the malls. You brought up the malls a few times, and something I've been obsessed with is how they've been dying. And
Yeah.
literally left and right. There was a mall near St. Louis, Missouri that was pretty active, and I think it was one of the ones I remember being huge when I was a kid, and I would go there every once in a while, like I think twice in my life actually only, but it was something that was such a experience. And now all these malls are closing. What can you do with those spaces? Turn it into colleges. I've seen some people do. I've seen a couple people actually turn them into like housing, like a mansion, if you will. But it's like, what can you do with that space and make it useful too?
Yeah, totally. Well, and
Mixed, maybe.
again comes back to the sort of development, redevelopment projects, changing the face of a city. So
Yeah.
I don't want to, be in the commercial space, like, let me tell you, from what I've seen so far and what I've heard, it's very traditional. It's quite full of dinosaurs who want to invest in them all and put Nordstrom in it still,
Yeah.
and JC Penney's in it, like, just dinosaurs doing dinosaur things. So all that stuff's going to be extinct in like a year or two. So to enable investors to come in or developers to come in to acquire a mall, to then bring in like not just co-working spaces, because co-working's been going for good amount of time now, but like co-working, co-living, pop-up shops, any sort of like concepts that again push the boundaries of commercial and actually take commercial into more interesting or down more interesting avenues. That's what I'm interested in. Now, there's going to be deals that are boring, and let's say there's traditional ones in there, traditional deals. But my goal, if you like, or my hope, is to be able to suggest directions to developers and investors, and then say, right, this is identify the building, and then let's go and build this into something that can really change the city and attract people, like literally make people move there, because we're at the forefront of commercial, and it's more interesting. And that for me is what is lacking in the real estate industry right now. There's just too many people doing too many traditional things. Not enough risk. Well, there's enough risk in, like, it's like that they're risking a lot on a very traditional model, where I think that it would be it's like doing more interesting things in the commercial space especially is what I want to do.
Something you might not know about me, Dave, is that I started out my content journey around smart city development, and that's what I wanted to learn, work towards, and decrease urban sprawl, and really kind of work towards the green and more interspersed or interrelated spaces. And so when I went to DC last month for the first time, and I went into this area that was a little farther out, because they don't want to replace the traditional areas with the newer stuff, but they're kind of building on the outskirts still. But it was a mixed thing. It had 3 layers of apartments, and on the bottom layer below those 3 layers were commercial stuff, and there was a whole little park and areas of restaurants and stuff like that. And that's where I see cities going towards more so anyways down the line. And eventually too, like, I saw this one video yesterday actually where they took a old strip mall, tore it all down, built a parking garage in one corner of it, but in the rest of it they made it a mixed development. So they had residential, a little park, even a little meeting center for people to kind of do stuff together. So it became like a little downtown on that one block, and it was kind of beautiful.
And I think also just the thing that I think the US needs to do more is like look outside the US and look at things that are working in Central, South America, Europe. Like vertical gardens you see, I think, in Korea, for example, or South Korea. Like up the side of the bit, like the garden you're losing a lot of green when you're developing, using a lot of concrete. So you have vertical gardens on all 4 sides of the skyscraper. Like that, just that alone is like visually stunning, and something that I think we don't do in the US and we should. And by the way, that would also absorb a lot of the carbon emissions from
green
vehicles.
architecture.
Like, so easy, such an easy thing to do. Well, maybe it's not that easy, but should be doing it. And then in addition to that, rooftop gardens, like instead of it just being a useless roof, as in you can't use it, I've seen like you see in Mexico, like rooftop gardens with like football pitches on, or soccer pitches, or like sports pitch. baseball diamond with like a giant net on top, and you play all your sports on the roof. So you can have that elevated, like, it's really cool, like an elevated sports experience. Get your fans up there as well. Pretty cool. You just don't see that. Or like botanic gardens. Like, why couldn't you put a botanic garden on the roof of a skyscraper? I don't see why you can't do that.
People do it all over the world, so.
Yeah, you do it. Exactly. You see it around the world. I've even seen, I think it was in Mexico actually, I've even seen like rooftop biking trails, right? So you're in the downtown. There's nowhere to cycle without getting squashed. And so like just take the elevator or have a separate elevator for bikes, and you just go up to the top, and then you cycle on the roof. So it's like
it sounds kind of dangerous to like fly off.
Well, yeah, obviously you'd have to.
Dark humor, Dustin.
Walls.
Yeah,
But yeah, you see those kind of projects in other countries. You just don't see that here.
So this will be a good time to wrap up, I think. What would be a good call to growth, do you think, Dave?
With regards to?
Well, I usually ask for a call to action, and then I could call to growth. And so the call to action, obviously, you can tell me which one you want, but like go to your channels and see what kind of content you're making, that kind of thing. But feel free to pitch something as well. But then like a call to growth, this channel is about being kind of self-development and doing many different things. So I always ask the guests, what is a growth thing someone can do to improve?
So personally, this is how I grow, right? So it's like immersion. So any form of immersion. So when I started learning Spanish, I lived. I actually initially lived in Austin, and I went to Mexico City, but then I moved to San Diego, and Tijuana was right there. So my goal was to become fluent in Spanish, and I went over the border at least once a week. I almost launched a business there, so I got to learn about business Spanish, and I just immersed myself in that. It wasn't like Duolingo, like once a week, or once a month, and yay, I've got loads of gold stars and it pings a lot. No, go to Mexico, go to a Spanish-speaking country. If you can't, in the US, I think we're close to 50% of the population speaking Spanish. So there's no excuse. So go to a taqueria, go to, a Mexican mall or wherever. Go to a Spanish school. So make friends with Mexicans. So or anyone who speaks Spanish. Loads of Colombians near where I live here in Denver. So just immerse yourself in that culture and that language, let's say. Watch loads of telenovelas, watch Mexican soccer, put the subtitles on. Like music, immerse yourself in it. Real estate, right? Switching to real estate. Immerse yourself in that, learn everything about it you can, speak to people who are actually doing it, get in buildings, go check out houses. You can get in with showing time for real estate, for example. With music, it's like you really can learn an absolute ton from YouTube. The trick is, it's not use YouTube. It's like find the right creators on YouTube. That takes time. So find the right people and the right style. They're teaching in the right style that resonates with you, or they're teaching the right content, and immerse yourself in that. And then again, just try and become an expert in. Like I instead of trying to learn loads of different doors, I was like Ableton. That's it. And Ableton is not perfect. I don't think any door is perfect, but I've got through a lot of frustration with Ableton to become, let's say, I'm an expert on that. So then I can produce and teach and show people how to use Ableton now. I'm getting a little bit more into analog gear. So here, I don't know if I can do this effectively. Maybe I can. It's a bit of a mess, but this is my analog gear. So it's my studio. So you got a mixer, you got 2 MIDI controllers, you got a little Micro Freak polysynth there. So again, like become I would say become a bit, become very knowledgeable about the digital side and digital music. And then I realized that actually you need the analog in there. People like analog warmth. They like the feeling of you playing instruments and it being human, not just AI, which is what, by the way, this is the thing I'm realizing is there's a lot of there are websites out there where you can go on a website and you can pretty much type in some cases hit one button, like a randomized button, but you could type in like Mid-Journey, right, for AI. You can type in, I want this kind of song that's this length, this BPM, this key, I want it to evoke these emotions, and then you press a button and it gives you a song and you can release that on Spotify. So yeah, that's killing the music industry, right? In a sense. But if you're a creator right now, how do you get around that? How do you beat AI? You just be more human. So live streaming videos, like being you and showing you messing up, being human, right? Not being perfect. I think that's even more so than ever. So people, you would think like by now video's done or live streaming is done, but because of AI, I think there's never been a more important time to be in front of the camera, being you, than right now, because that's how you beat the computers, and you beat AI, and you beat all the automation. It's like you be you.
So if someone wants to see you be you, Dave, where can people find you?
So for the let's with the music, for example, well, if you want to find me, if you want to find LUCKYKAT on the music side, it's at LUCKYKAT Meowsic on most channels. So like YouTube, yeah, across the board, pretty much. I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, every major streaming platform in the world. Mm-hmm. I'm on there as LUCKYKAT, and then for my other project KATNAP, that's at KATNAP Music, so it's with a K. So KATNAP Music for that, and then look out for the other music channel that'll be coming up. So I'll broadcast that on the LUCKYKAT and KATNAP channels to direct you there.
I might be able to add a link later too or something like that. So
yeah, and then on the real estate side, my website is Lowe. It's just simply lowe.com. So LOWE.com, and that just gets you to me for all the real estate stuff. Yeah.
Perfect. Once again, this is Dustin PolyInnovator and David Lowe on the Polymath PolyCast. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back, and thanks to all the viewers, all your fans and viewers who follow your channel, who've spent an hour watching this interview.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Kind of pivoting here. How did you get started with real estate? Okay.
Wardrobe. This is skillful editing.